this is Patty the Leather Lady. As I promised, we're doing a video on this Tucker saddle, and what we're doing is we are replacing this piece right here. Yeah, so I already did the other side, and I forgot I was going to do a video, but what we're going to do is show you how to replace this. It's very similar to an English saddle's knee roll as well. However, it's a lot. So this, if you're going to take on this project, it's all done by hand. So you'll want to make sure you know what you're doing first, and then we'll go from there. All right. So one of the first things you're going to do on this is you're going to want to unstitch it like I did up here. And why are we replacing it? It looks like it's still pretty worn and it's still got stuff, but you can see the foam. And the other side, actually the foam was coming through. So we want to make sure that we replace both sides so that he doesn't have to come back in a couple months and do the other side. And they match up as far as the leathers. So what you're going to do is you're just going to take a box knife or something sharp. Where did my box knife go? I always use Mr. Blue here because he's my favorite. And you want to use a sharp blade. Make sure it's a sharp blade. And what I did is I started in here. And then I just pulled back, and went all the way down. Now, when you get down to here, it's a little tricky, so start back here and then go this way. This is going to be a hard part to sew, guys. You're going to have to really get in there with your fingers and your hands and maybe a curved needle to do that, or you might have to do some tie-offs, which I'll show you that in the future. So once you get this piece off, okay, don't have to worry about this too much. This is, you're just going to use as a pattern, especially for your top. Now you're going to have some type of leather. I wanted him to use more of a pebbled motorcycle leather because it gives you just more stick. He didn't like it. And so I said, well, and I showed him some, shinier calf leather, a little thicker calf. And so it's about a 3-4 ounce calf, and he wanted that. So we're going to give him what he wants. However, I'll show you how to do this. It does have 1/2 inch high density foam, very thick, heavy, high density foam. Now, when you order your foams, ask for samples because 9 times out of 10, they're going to send you the wrong foam in the first place. Or it's foam that's not thick enough or hard enough or whatever. This would be sort of like a car upholstery foam kind of a thing. But you can get all different kinds of foams. If you're having knee issues, you might go to a little bit softer foam. You could do that. This is a trail saddle, so it's not going to matter. So once you're done and you get this piece off, what you're going to do is you're going to grab yourself if you have any quilting pins or an awl, anything like that, this is your awl. You're going to want to, excuse me, I have a cold, get in there here and take out all your stitching. You want to make sure every piece of stitching is removed because once you go back to hand stitch it, you're going to have problems. And if if your eyes aren't very good and you're not quite sure, did I get that one? Did I get them all out? What I do is I just take that needle or whatever. I go in the back, and if I can pull it through the back, pull it through the back. But you got to get them all out. Okay. And I'm like, okay, so there's a lot of dirt in this one. So I just take the needle, push it through, make sure that you get all the dirt out. And that there's no threads in there. So that would be your second step. So you're going to cut it off your first step. Second step is to go ahead and make sure that all your holes are clean. And then this part is actually ready to go. Okay? Excuse me. Oh my goodness. I always put anything, oops, there's another project. Anything of my clients on a sheepskin just because I want to protect the saddle. So you want to put down, and if you work with saddles, you can take these sheepskins and just sew them together. I just did a whip stitch to sew them together, just so that I have that for putting the saddles on there because I'm going to protect them. Because they're not mine, so you want to do that. Okay, so the next step is you got to get your foam. Okay, you got to need to make a foam piece. This is the one that didn't work out very well because I didn't like the way I cut it. And so we're going to do another one. So we're going to leave this piece. Well, we're not going to leave it all together. So the next step after that is to go ahead and remove this piece. Now, I try my best to keep the original pieces, especially if I'm doing handwork. So if you look at the stitching holes on that, it is a bugger. There is 7 stitches to each inch, and they're very close together, very small. And so I don't want to have to repeat that because I can't put this on my big sewing machine. I can't lay it flat enough to get on my sewing machine. However, what we're going to do next is we're going to remove all this and give him his original piece. Is it easier to go ahead and make another piece? Yes, that would be a reconstruction or a refurbishing, because once you get this leather piece cut, you got to dye it to match the rest of the saddle. Now that looks like it's like a lighter mahogany, pretty much, but he wants, you know, to keep it as original as we can, because this takes a lot of time, a lot of pulling of everything off. So I'm going to use my box knife. I'm going to make sure that I have a sharp knife, which this one is not. So I'm going to change the blade. You can use an X-Acto knife too, which is a little smaller. Excuse me, guys. I've been sick for like 3 days, and I was going to do this, but I've got to get the video done because the saddle has got to go back to the owner. So we're going to just take this and we're going to split this off. Now you've got this side here. You can go ahead and just lift. I don't want to cut the leather, so I'm going to lift, and I don't care what I do to this piece. Okay, I just want it off. Okay, we're going to sand it anyway. So we're going to just remove it and try to keep all that leather there. So you're lifting up and cutting up, so you're not cutting the leather. All right. And then you're just going to keep doing this process. See how that's coming up? It is bringing some of the, this is so glued on here. Tucker does not want you to, I don't know what glue they used, but they glued it down like snot. So this is not going to be very pretty when we get this off. So I actually reached out to my guy that does car upholstery, and I said, okay, what do you do? And so he knows I work on saddle stuff. He knows I work on leather, saddlery stuff, and the solvents he uses to get the glue loosened up, you cannot use on leather, guys. FYI, this is a key point. Some of your solvents that you use to loosen the glue, to get the glue off, you cannot use on leather. What it does is your leather will begin to shrivel and shrink up. So it may work on plastic, it may work on fake leather, but when you get it to the real leather, it's going to shrink your leather up. Then you're going to have a mess. You're going to have to make a whole new piece. So that's from my professional car person who works on leather seats all the time. So there's that. So I'm just going to keep doing this, and once I get this all off and I get the back start off, I will show you, and yeah, we'll get started on that. So I'll be right back. As you see, I've pulled all this stuff away, and what I'm going to do now, yeah, you've still got some on there. Don't worry about that, because you're going to sand that down anyway a little bit, really gently sand it down and get that off. So what you're going to do is flip it over. Now, because they use such a good glue on these here, what I would suggest is starting and cutting your foam piece out. So what I did is I'm going to leave these, and I'll come back and tackle that later. However, I need to get this foam piece out, okay? So bend your leather back, and then just gradually cut it away. Are you going to leave some on the leather? Yes. Don't worry about that. We'll show you about that in a little bit. But this is sort of how you would do a saddle seat. Also, if you're not going to take the seat off of the saddle for a Western saddle. But you see how this is coming. Now, I grabbed a new blade. So make sure that you're always using a sharp blade because, for one, you don't want to bleed. You don't want to get a cut and bleed because you don't want to be on the 10 o'clock news, you know, because if it bleeds, it leads. Just joking. That is when I did videography, this classes, that's what they used to say. Do you know why on the news it's always what comes up first is whatever bleeds, it leads, which is true, which is very true. Anyway, so you're just going to cut this all away, make it easier for yourself. You'll come back to this, but you just have to be due diligent to get that out. Now this one is a lot easier than the last piece that I had. Again, with foam, we'll discuss that in a minute, how to cut foam. Some people use a hot knife, some people use fancy knives. Again, I went back to my automotive guy because he does foam all the time. And I said, what do you use to get your foam, cut your foam? And he goes, I go into the kitchen, get my wife's bread knife, and that's what I use. So he goes and go to Goodwill and get yourself a bread knife. And you know what? When I sold my hot knife, I'd used the hot knife like twice and I was horrible with it. I sold it and I said, you can do this, go ahead. Now there is a lot of like automotive companies that do use hot knives, but I don't do enough work with foam to need to do something like that. All right, so as you can see, it's coming off nicely. And I'm just gonna keep working that while the camera's rolling. I'm not touching any of the leather. Trying not to anyway. And again, you gotta get all this stitching down off of this side too. Remember, you picked out all that stitching over there? You don't have to do that with this too. This is probably the most time-consuming part of this process. And like I said, this is not for the weak. This is for somebody advanced. Please, if you are doing saddle repairs, know what you are doing before you do it. Liability is huge. If you don't have insurance, you better get it. Because we soon have you covered in your country. And yeah, well, I'm just repairing it. And yeah, if you just repair it, somebody gets hurt on it, they're coming back at you. That's why insurance is so expensive for doing saddle repairs and work. And I don't need to dissuade people, but you gotta know the facts, what you're getting into. All right? Know the facts of what you're getting into. So let's get this part done. Now, if you don't have a belt sander, say in your workshop with belt sander or anything like that, you want to get yourself some coarse sandpaper just from like hardware store, sheets of it. You're going to spend a lot more time doing it by hand than doing it on a machine. So, or maybe you can borrow a machine and that will help you there because time is money when you're doing this kind of stuff. Okay, I'm getting down there. So this is a good place if you have any comments, any questions. This is a good place to ask. It's also a good place to go ahead and subscribe to my channel. If you're watching this on the Leather Lady LLC, we have a new channel for the saddle repair and restoration. Go on, saddle repair and restoration, and Leather Lady will pop up. And go ahead and sign up with that. I appreciate it. Because that's for a lot of serious people who want to do saddle work restorations. I answer every comment. I will tell you every single comment. If I don't, I'm on vacation or I'm sick, and that's usually very rare. Okay, so we got the two pieces, right? So now we got to take these edgings off. I just heard in my head, why can't we just leave that edging on? Well, you could. The problem is you're going to have to sand this up because if you go to glue everything else down and now you've got to pick out all the threads on the bottom anyway, glue doesn't really adhere to smooth that much. So you just definitely want to get rid of some of that smoothness. Okay, I'm just taking off this big chunk here because I have a big chunk there. And that's okay, it doesn't matter because what I'm going to show you next, once we get, I'm going to go ahead and finish taking this edge off because I am going to take this edge off for sure. And then I'll come back and show you how to do the sanding. All right. Okay, I'm just starting to pull this, so you're going to see how easy this comes off. Very easy. Be careful that you're not ripping any of the holes. That is because I made sure that I had every piece cut on this side, okay? And that is just seriously glued on there. Now I will see if I want to take off this side. I don't know if that side's going to be just as pleasant, but I seriously doubt it. I'm going to show you a trick I use on the edges. That will make your life a little bit easier. My hands are so sore from doing this other side. Okay, so there we go. Okay, so we got all that off. We got the edges off. Now do you see there's a little bit of thickness there? So that's what we're going to do next. I'm going to show you how to sand it and we'll go from there. Okay, this is a Master Tools sander and burnisher. You don't need this big fancy thing. However, if you ever get one, they're fantastic. This one's from Weaver. They do make them a lot cheaper than what Weaver wants. But this will also have, you can also get extra sanding and extra burnishing for different dyes and stuff. So you can see I've been using this one for other ones. But we're going to use the sander today. So what we're going to do is we're going to peel off all the threads, and if you go on the back side, you should be able to just go ahead and rip all of that off. Okay, and you can do that here on this one too. It may need to just get started, but maybe that one I did already. Nope, I don't think so. Anyway, we'll get to that in a minute. So you're going to go ahead and sand off all this foam is what you're going to do. So all you're going to do is place your foam underneath the thing and just let the sander do its work. And you hold your piece flat so that it's coming off with just being flat. And you might have to press. You're going to get a little bit of heat there. However, if you just keep going, it's going to come off. It's going to take a minute for all this to come off, and it is going to make a mess. Okay. Now, somebody I heard say, well, can I just leave, if I get it all flat, can I leave some of the foam on? Yeah, you could, but you want to make sure that it's flat to here. So you want to make sure that that happens. See, that's starting to come off. So if you want to guide it and then use the rest of it, you can. Whoop, that can happen too. Hang on to it. And so you're just going to do this process all the way through until you get it all off. Now you can cut some more away, but for me, even if I get it all flat and get it off, you can see I use the middle more than I do the sides, so I'm using the sides. So definitely don't want to be wearing nice clothes when you do leather work. Tell ya. So I'm going to keep doing this. You can keep watching, and the camera may die. Yeah, I finished it and I matched it and all that kind of stuff, $150. But the big thing about this is you have to sewing. I'm not going to here, I just want to get a little bit more flat. So I'm doing it. And I'm doing it smooth down now. I use a solar grade sandpaper. Here. Okay, so a piece is still on there, so you've got a problem there. A piece on the end. So I can take it off. Take the glue off. I got it down there. Okay, because if I don't, you have a bump on the end, you can't use those holes. Really down now, get out of the leather. You just constantly feel those lumps. Yeah, just like it with your leather. Sort of like with your leather. I was really with the leather. You know, how much can I do? What can I do? The final words, logically, oh, you know, first breaking the owner, then you realize you're not instructing the owner. So the word, the final word, that was the first you. No, first thing you're doing here. Is this the right way? Certainly the right way. This is just the way I do it. And you just keep going with it. So yeah, it looks ugly. We don't care. We just want to make sure it's flat. Make sure there's no bumps. Now you go over the word. So then we're going to do the next step is making a pattern. This will be our next step. So I'm going to stop the video and do the board. And when I get done with this, we'll go to the next step. Okay, so I went ahead and cut the foam, and it's more not as high density foam, but it's pretty hard foam. And this is something that he wanted. We got as much off here as I wanted. It's nice and smooth. I still might do a couple of spots. I just feel like that. And when I was pulling all these threads out, one thing I want to say about that, when you're pulling it out and it's going and it's coming out really nice, be really gentle and careful if you're using old leather or if it's an old piece of leather, because if you pull too hard and you do that, you might rip between the stitches because the leather's so dry. This one is not. But the leather might be so dry that you just rip it and then you're not going to have nice pretty stitches anymore. But I did cut this out, and I just cut it out literally, guys, with a box knife. And what I'll do is I'll put it on here and I will go around and trim it. Now, I did make it the size of this because I knew I was going to trim it, but here's the key. So when I go ahead and put the lambskin back on here, or the whatever leather you're using, you want to make sure that you're getting this to the very edge, because this is where your knees are going to be. So you don't want it back here. You want it snug up against here. So you want to crunch that a little bit in there so that you make sure, because here's the thing. We're going to glue this side onto this, and we're going to glue the other side onto the lambskin because you want it tight on there. Now, when you do that, there's going to be air excuse me, inside. So sometimes you'll see on the back side here, you'll see some holes. That's for the air. Or sometimes you may see some holes on the edges. That's just for the air. So when you put your knee on there and you compress it, that it doesn't go poof and your glue comes unglued and then it's all a mess. So you have to glue it to the foam on each side so that you get a nice. Now, you can also take a rolling pin. There's, like, if you go to the kitchen and get a rolling pin, you can actually roll it on here and roll it and get it all nice and smooth. You can use a ruler and get it nice and smooth. Just make sure you don't scratch it. That's why rolling pins are nice. You can use a lot of different tools that are not made for leather for your leather work. The one thing I am going to go do is I'm going to trim down these sides just with a regular pair of scissors. And I'm going to make, instead of a sharp edge, I'm going to make a nice smooth edge here that is going to sort of not be just so sharp. I'm going to make it so that it's sort of a rounded edge a little bit. Then I'm going to trim those rough spots. Why did I just think of RuPaul? That's funny. That is too funny. My mind works really weird, guys. So I'm just going to go ahead and keep doing this all the way around, making the edges nice and smooth, so that when I tuck those edges in, I don't want much off of there. I just want the edges, that I don't get a really sharp edge. Now, some people may want a sharp edge. Leave it a sharp edge. I personally don't want that. And I'm going to start sneezing. This cold is kicking my butt. I've been down for about 3 days and trying to get all this work done before the end of the year. So if you're watching this, this was filmed the end of 2025. Lots of static electricity with foam. Okay, see there is a bulge there. So I'm gonna trim that gently. Now it's nice and smooth. Gently. You can do a lot with a box cutter. You know, you use round knives, you use all that kind of stuff, and they are nice to have, but you don't have to have them. So I'm gonna round this tip out just a little bit because I knew there was a little bit more. Okay. So that's nice. So let's flip it over. Go ahead and just trim the edges. You can see I'm not taking much off. I'm just making it a nice soft edge. And I may have to trim off a little later, but that's fine. It's all about just testing the waters, because each saddle, each piece that you do is gonna always have something different to it. The static on that. Stop! Stop! It's attacking! It's attacking! All right. Oh, we got to do this side. Looks like I got to take a little bit more there. There we go, nice smooth edge. Don't want to hurry through this, guys. If you're in a hurry to do this, then you're going to mess up, especially now that we're coming to the gluing. You got to have a lot of patience for that, because you may have to remove, put on, removed, put on, removed, put on, till you get it right. Then I pull all these little extra hairs and junk off of here. Because if you're using something that's thinner, you want to make sure there's nothing in your foam. It will show through, like even just this little piece of foam on top, it will show through. So you want to make sure your foam is nice and clean. Okay? All right. So now we're ready to glue. I will definitely, so I am going to glue it all the way to the edge. I'm going to glue it. Here's how I'm going to do it, guys. So there's the holes for the thing. So I'm going to push and glue, push and glue, push and glue, push and glue, because I want it to spring back a little bit, because I want that full, I don't want any gaps. Where is the other one? I don't want any gaps here. So it should be flush to the edge, all the way flush to the edge, no gaps, okay? And so that's what I'm gonna do, is I'm gonna glue it. I'll glue I won't glue the holes, but I'll glue next to the holes, and I'll leave that, but then I'm gonna put this all the way to the edge, and then I'm gonna smush, 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 smush. All right, that's the next step, guys. And so what we need to do is we need to make a pattern, and we need to make sure that we have enough. You cannot do, you could lay this 2 ways. I did it piece by piece. So this side here, I need to make sure that the foam, that side is going to have the pretty side. I'm going to tell you pretty side. And you want to be able to either flip this over and do the reverse, or you can fold your leather over in half and do it. I would not recommend the second. So if you do fabrics, yes, you can do that. But with leather, this is thin, this is stretchable, a little bit stretchable, and you won't get an accurate cut. So my suggestion to you on anything that you do with using a pattern, especially with the thinner leathers, because a lot of the times it does stretch, you want to make sure that you flip it and get the other side. I already did the other side. I'll show you here in a minute, but this is what you want to do. Now, this piece has to have a little overlap to here, because you see where the dye is all worn off, and that's where we're going to stitch that. So what I did on the first one, I probably should have given myself a little bit more room. So what I did is I marked it to 3/4 of an inch out from the edge here. So I did a 1/2 inch on the other one, but I wished I would have given a little bit more, only because we got to remember, we got the thickness of the foam. We got to make sure we have enough there. So all I did was mark it with a pencil, which is a white pencil. If you have some sewing chalk, you can do that. Definitely, as you can see, I started cutting and I thought, oh crap, I got to do a video. So what you're going to do is just cut. Now you're going to hold this piece down. If it's a stretchable leather, hold it down, go a few inches, hold it down, go a few inches, because it is going to move. Lift your blade so that you're getting a flat cut. We can always go back and trim it. However, you want to make sure that you're not going and then you have a ripple and then you have a mess. So make sure that you have a flat cut. So you see me lifting it up all the time because I want to hit my marks. I want to hit these marks, but I don't want it to be stretched so that it's all wonky. Because again, this is stretchable leather, and we want it that way a little bit, but we're going to glue it down so it doesn't move. We don't want it to move once it's in place. Okay, so you're just going to cut your pattern out. And again, this is another reason why I didn't want to make another piece. See all these holes? I would have had to get those exactly, because on the saddle, that's where those holes are. Exactly, and that's a whole restoration. That would have cost him a lot more money. All right, so I really don't care too much about this side. I'm going to come out a little bit. I'm not going to worry about this side because I'm going to trim it. Once I get this foam piece on and everything, I'm going to trim it so that it's nice and smooth, and then we begin to sew it back on. All right, so let's see here. I'm sorry, my arms are going to be in the way for a minute. And I apologize, I still have a cold, a bad cold. Yes, I do work even when I'm sick, sadly. Okay, so I'm going to take this, so this is a little bit more down here, and I'll show you how to fold those once you come to the end. But I'm going to come out about a 1/2 inch. Okay, and I'm going to do the same shape. Let's see here. I'm trying to do this so you guys can see, because I won't need this much. I just want to have a little extra, because if you don't have a little extra and you're gluing things down, then what's going to happen is you're not going to have enough on this side, and it's going to come back here and you won't have anything to sew. And then what happens is your leather will be coming up because you didn't sew it down. You can glue it down, but it doesn't mean that that glue is going to hold. You need to be able to stitch it down. Okay, so what we got here now are the two pieces, right? So this is going to flip over. There we go. So this is going to be the pretty side. This is what we're going to be putting on, that kind of a thing. So now we have two ways that we can do this. Okay, so I use, FYI, I use a lot of the tape on this. It does get a little sticky if you're using it through your needles, like in your where is it? Your stitch marks. If you're using it through here, it does get a little sticky. You get yourself some Goo Gone and take it out. However, I do this because I want to hold it down. Now I can glue. Also, I can glue the whole thing and pray that everything is smooth, okay? But I also use barge, okay? You could use a spray adhesive if you wanted to. Barge has been my friend. What I do with this is, because we're putting it on the foam and the foam's going to absorb it in globs. So what I do is I just get a nice smooth, even a piece of cardboard, and just smooth it out and make sure it's thin enough so that you don't get a heavy glob, light glob, heavy glob, light, because that's going to show through. If she was using the motorcycle leather like I wanted him to, more like this, then it would have turned out, you would probably not see it as much, but we're using a thinner one, so we want to make sure that it doesn't show through. And I will show you on the other one. And also when we get to the point of flattening it out, making sure there's no air bubbles in there, because that air bubble will show through. And let me tell you, to try to get those out, it's a nightmare if you can. Not always that way. Okay, so the next step is we are gonna go ahead and put this. So my first step on this would be to go ahead and sew this so it's down on this edge. So then we have that side done. And then we'll go back and flip that back over and put the glue, okay? Put the glue on the bottom, put the foam, and it is going to be a bear. This is why I said it's going to be hard, because you want this foam butt up against those stitching marks. But when you've sewn it, you've got a little bit of a lip that you've got to push up against. So again, this part is the trickiest part for getting your foam to where you want it to be, all right? So I am gonna pause it, and I'm gonna go ahead and use my tape. And now you can buy this tape on our website that comes in different widths. It's usually a roll. So I think this is definitely, I think this is an 1/8 inch. Nope, 1/4 inch. And it is gonna cover these holes, but I don't care because I'm gonna be sewing through it with my machine. This is 7 stitches per inch. I'm gonna sew through it with my machine, and then all this is gonna be hand stitched. So, okay, so what you see here is I have taken this because I didn't want to waste time. I went and cut this in half, and I lined it along my edges. I left the ends because I need to see a starting point. I could probably put a little bit down here, I don't care. But I need to see my starting point. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna lay this, because this has an edge that it is, it's not gonna fray. So you're just gonna put a raw edge. Let me see here, hang on a second. Make sure I got this right. Yeah. So you're gonna take this raw edge and flip it over, and you're gonna just go to where that raw piece stops. So you are gonna take this by hand and just do the edging like this. I want to keep it in place. Personally, I want to use tape. If you want to use glue, you go right ahead. This is the way I do it. There's no right, wrong. There's no perfect way. It's just what it is. Now, I did do the back side because once I get this over here, I want the leather on the bottom side to stay in place so it doesn't shift. So I'm going to do the same thing here. Yes, it's a lot of tape. However, this is two-way. It's an extra strong tape. So this is what we use. And it stays. Let me tell you, it totally stays. Okay. So I'm going to start putting this over. I'll show you when it's finished right before I sew. Okay. So I went through and I put the side on. Now, the other thing too is it's a little ripply. So I'm going to grab my boning knife or whatever you want to call it, and I'm going to smooth it out, okay? And smooth it to the edges, because here's where you want to do all your adjustments. Like if this is too thin, I need to bring it out to make it all look perfect. You bring that in, but you're smoothing this out. And your stitches are gonna also help in smoothing that out. But this is only because of the tape, and you're not putting any gussets in this piece or anything. And I left this end because what I wanna do is show you when we get to this point, we're not gonna sew this quite yet. I'll show you what I'm gonna do next. So we're gonna fold this over, But when we get down to this piece and we trim it, we're going to leave a little bit on the end because then we'll fold it over so you have a nice little end there. So that'll be the last thing that we do. So now here's the question. Should I sew it right now? I could. However, what happens is you're creating a pocket and you have no room in there to put your foam. And then when you do that, you can't lay things flat or get your foam up there to the edge. So my suggestion to you is, if you're trying to do this, did I do that right? Yeah. Is to put it all the way up to the stitching. Okay, I don't care about this. If I have to trim it, I can trim it. But my key point in any of this is getting it so it's butted up, because when you fold it over, you want that little bit of a lip, but you don't want it way back here. You want it up against where your stitches are. So you need to make sure that you are butt up against that stitching, okay? So that is one of the key elements. And you know what? If you're doing this on the machine, your machine should be able to handle that if it goes through anyway, so it doesn't matter. But if you get it too far off like this, that's not gonna work. So you might even have to pull some of that tape back and get it in even closer. I'll show you here in a second. Because what's going to happen is you're going to sew that down, and look at how nice that's going to be, okay? So your stitching marks are almost right on the edge, okay? Because what you're going to do is you're going to flip this over and start your stitches from one of these holes so you know exactly where to go, okay? So that's where you want, that's why you want to know where your holes are. And then as you stitch, you're going to be pulling so that it's nice and smooth and flat. Okay, because that stitching is going to stitch some of this foam down, and we'll glue this next. Okay, so that's the next step. I'm going to flip this over. I got to make sure I flip this, because then once we get that sewn, we've got to glue this, and then we can start getting it so that it's on these holes, so then we can start hand stitching. All right, so let me get this glued down. I'm going to use barge. I'm going to use probably something similar to this, or a piece of cardboard or something flat that you could use. You could use a paint scraper. You could use a spatula, whatever you want to do. You can use household utensils. Save yourself some money. A lot of stuff you can get from your toolbox or your paint kits or your kitchen. All right. This is where you can save some money. All right. You don't need this, but you need something to smooth those edges out. Okay, this just has nice smooth edges. Okay, I've got the foam glued down. I just put a nice neat. Yes, I'm over on here. That's okay, because we're going to trim that. But now we're ready to sew. So when we go to sew, it's going to make a little line down here, and it's just going to make it all the way up to there. So you're going to have to be tricky. You're going to have to keep pulling on this just to make sure that it is stretched out to its max, so that we don't get any air bubbles when we do glue it down for the second time. So I'm going to go ahead and sew this on the machine, and I'll be back. All right, so I got this piece on. I used actually some Gorilla Spray glue to do the top part. And then I went and I taped the edges. I tucked the foam in a little bit, and then I went and taped the edges to make it easier. And then what I'm also doing now is I'm taking my awl, and because this black leather doesn't have holes in it, and I have to hand stitch it, excuse me, I am going to put holes in it to make my life a little bit easier and go a little bit faster. Also, this is helping if there's any glue in those holes to remove those glue issues, because it'll come on my aw's getting sticky, and that will help when I go ahead and sew it. Plus, this is a good way to find out if you got all your threads out, because I'm telling you, if you don't get those threads out, it's gonna make your life a little bit of living heebie-jeebies. And see, this one didn't want to go through, so I'm like, okay. So I'm going to do this. It's tedious, but you know what? I'm going to spend the extra 15 minutes or so to do this on both of the edges, because otherwise I'm spending more time sewing than I want. You know, for me, time is money. And I want to make sure that, and I've got a deadline to get this done today. So I want to make sure that I can sew speedy-deedy. Or speedy. Anyway, so this is what I'm doing for the next 15 minutes. And then what I'm going to do is, we've got the saddle all done here. You know, we got all these cleaned out, the threads cleaned out, hopefully. So what I'm doing is, I'm going to put this in here. It's going to be nice and neat right here. It's going to get a bend in here. So this is what we're going to do. So I'm going to take a clamp, or you can take some needles and put them in the holes. And I'm going to clamp these to where the holes begin. And then I'm just going to begin stitching. And at the end result, it's going to pretty much look like that. And then I'll go ahead and mold it so that it molds with the saddle, so that it goes like that. Or people have asked me before, well, you didn't show me how to stitch it. You have to go to my basic stitching. It's just a basic saddle stitch with a 2-needle process, and learn that. That's why I make all these extra videos, so that you can go and watch. So it's called the basic stitch, basic saddle stitch, basic saddle stitch. So go and watch that video to learn how to stitch this part. All right. Thank you for watching this video, and I hope it was helpful and you were able to either share it with your friends, learn something, or hopefully watch more of our videos. Please don't forget to go to the leatherladyllc.com for any of your supplies for saddlery. We do sell parts and things of that nature, along with sheepskin products. Just go on there and peek, and you'll see all kinds of special things. Also, don't forget, we do have a YouTube channel just for saddlery, and it is called Saddle Repair and Restoration. Subscribe, like, and share to our channels. It helps support us, and we greatly appreciate it so very much. Thank you for watching, and have a blessed night.